What was one experience in your life that hardened you as a person? Delivering ineffectual first aid to an 8-year-old girl who had been crushed against a store wall by a drunk, drugged-up driver. My mum telling me she wouldn't and couldn't ever love me because I'm too much like my dad was a kicker. When my girlfriend committed suicide. Just one. Taking care of my stepdad while he died of mad cow disease. Runner up my bio, dad having a degenerative brain disease PSP and calling me at work slurring his words. We never had the greatest relationship and I was on the clock and told him I had to go. Had no idea what he was saying. He then wrote down numbers and names of family members and put them in his pocket and drove into a tree. He didn't make it. Having unsympathetic, emotionally abusive parents. I learned over the years that my family does not care about me unless I act a certain way for them. If I ever say how I truly feel, they'll disown me and probably try to physically abuse me as well. My grandmother rented my sister and I out to drug dealers for drugs when we were kids. She still haunts my dreams. No throwaway. Got molested for 2 years by a football coach. 38 complaints against him. 7 of us went to court. The odds were heavily in his favor. I realized at that time that there is no justice. He got away with it. Being peppered with glass from a car bomb at age 10. It made me suspicious of any environment regardless of how safe it is. My father died suddenly my senior year of high school. Prison is rough. Not the worst experience of my life, but it definitely changed me. Gestures vaguely in the direction of the Marine Corps. Getting diagnosed in with MS. Thought I would be young and invincible forever. Getting cheated on when our son was a newborn and I was going through a cancer scare. Then husband killed himself when I found out. I will never trust or love with my whole heart again. The volume of pain he inflicted was just too much. When I left my abusive wife, after asking friends for help for years, not a one friend stood by me. Being related to a mass shooter. The unanswered questions and the guilt took years to get over, not to mention being triggered by looking at the news every other week it seems. Sexual abuse, overdose, homelessness. In that order. Things are a world away from where I was 10 years ago and I put a lot of that on the fact that there isn't much of a reason as to how I survived, but I'm still fucking here. Now, to make sure that nothing like that ever happens to my wife or her boy and hopefully another little one next year. After going to therapy, I've learned that everyone knew something was wrong with me but never cared enough to guide me to help. I was called a pack animal LOL. My mom being diagnosed with cancer months after my son was born and dying within 2 months was rough. She would have been the best grandma and we all loved her dearly. No only are we no contact with my wife's family, my dad decided getting engaged within a year and hardly spending any time with his new grandson was the best course of action. The summer after my son was born we ended up losing an entire support system other than the occasional visit from a very self-centered old bastard with no shame or honor, and it was the nail in the coffin for my faith in humanity. My dad died. Everything was about Mom's loss. He was my best friend. 25 years I miss him every day. Both my parents had extended life-threatening illnesses in separate unrelated incidents. When I was fairly young my mother had back surgery with complications that kept her in hospital for what seemed like the entire school year when I was 7, and my dad had a career-ending heart attack in front of me when I was 13. I learned early on how to self-soothe out of necessity and am perfectly comfortable in hospital waiting rooms. The death of my mom, after fighting for approximately 14 months, cancer. Incredibly, I don't describe her death as a sad moment. I was actually relieved that her pain would be over. I was too young to find solutions or answers by myself, but there were people by my side. Unfortunately, my username checks out. I was sexually assaulted a few years ago. Right now I feel weak because I'm scared of men and boys that are bigger than me. I know when I'm older I will heal from this and will make something good out of it. I might try to help raise awareness and help kids that went through something similar. Right now I'm trying to focus more on my safety, but I'm going to start trying to work on my fears when I feel ready and show people that I can be strong too. I'm still trying to process and understand, but I'm working on it. When I was a child, I wasn't allowed to be unhappy, because my mom would be angry since she did so much for me, so how can I not be happy? If you constantly have convincingly act happy, you eventually begin to lose grasp on when it's real. Homelessness. It opened my eyes to how hypocritical charity can be, and how little people care about their neighbors. My girlfriend kicked me out when she was 3 months pregnant because I didn't make enough money, and told me I'd never see our son. 13 years later, I'm a very involved dad who fought like a bastard for shared custody, and don't regret a thing. Watching my stepdad waste away. 6 feet 3 inches 230 pounds. Ex-military sniper. Professional firefighter. Bona fide badass. Pancreatic cancer went undetected until it was too late. In a month he was 150 pounds. And couldn't walk by himself. I watched him die today. I'll never be quite the same. I was groomed by a man in his 30s when I was 17. Not quite pedo, and 17 was the age of consent where I lived, but looking back the relationship was abusive and manipulative. I've had intimacy issues ever since. Reaching rock bottom and attempting suicide, medically deceased, then worked my way back over 10 years to a happy, content life. I was a cunt before, but I'm a humble man now. Death of a child. Being sexually harassed in the workplace by a female who was also the boss's friend. It was fucking hell, just hell. I was made to feel like the perpetrator when I sought help, and now 10 years on I still get the occasional email from her. Losing my wife. When I was 18, my dad and I got in a nasty argument and then he killed himself that night. When the EMT's police came, they found an old photo of him and I. Several months earlier, I had written on the back of that old photo, "I wish it could still be like this." The photo was either next to his body or next to his suicide note, can't remember which. It's been 7 years and I don't think the guilt will ever go away. The first foster care home I ever went into. Messed me up even though I was there so little time. So glad I got adopted by my wonderful mother. Some people shouldn't ever be foster parents. Finding my best friend's body after he killed himself in our apartment. Put me into a decade of depression and alcoholism that nearly killed me. So I'm police. When I was a rookie patrol officer, I was the first to respond to a father that shot and killed his 12 and 8-year-old sons in front of their mother. Then he shot and killed himself. The 8-year-old was still alive when I got there, but died very soon after. Hardening is both good and bad. PTSD is no joke and I'm living testimony. But someone has to be able to respond to these calls and not lose their cool. And I can do that. First responders, fire, EMS, police, nurses, doctors, and military too kind of have to do a baptism by fire with stuff like this. I'm not unique. Betrayal from your closest confidant, spouse's betrayal. One day you're doing almost everything together, then bam, you're by yourself, betrayed and lost. Kind of hard to get back up, but luckily I did. I was 6 years old when Iraq invaded my country, saw people die and heard guns and explosions all the time for 7 months. I fell in love with a girl who dumped me because I had a highly treatable cancer 4 years before meeting her. My girlfriend of almost 8 years leaving me really woke me up to what a shitty person I was at the time. Have made a lot of life changes based on her feedback. It's been about a decade, and I'm in a much better place and would like to think I'm a much better person. I hope she's doing